29F have stopped tipping, and people are acting like I just committed a crime. For years, I was the person who always tipped well. I'd leave at least 20%, sometimes even more if the service was great. I worked in retail when I was younger, so I understood the struggle, but lately, this whole tipping culture has gotten out of control. It all started when I realized just how many people are expecting tips for jobs that didn't traditionally require them. I'd grab a coffee, and suddenly there's a screen asking if I want to tip 18%, 20%, or 25% for someone who just tapped a button on a machine. I'd pick up takeout and be guilted into tipping. I even went to a self-checkout once, and there was a tip option. Who am I tipping? The machine. At first I thought, okay, maybe it's just small businesses trying to stay afloat. But then I saw this happening everywhere. It wasn't just coffee shops and takeout anymore. It was retail stores, bakeries, even places where I was doing all the work myself. And the worst part, the people who work behind the scenes, cooks, dishwashers, janitors, don't see a cent of that money. The tipping system in restaurants made me think the hardest. Everyone always talks about how servers rely on tips, but you know who works just as hard? The kitchen staff, the dishwashers, the people who clean the restaurant before and after closing. Yet, all the attention is on the servers, because they're the ones directly interacting with customers. And yes, I know servers deal with a lot, but their job is often easier than the ones breaking their backs in the kitchen. I have a friend, M, 32M, who's a chef, and he told me how frustrating it is to see servers walking out with hundreds in tips while he and his team, who are sweating over hot stoves, make barely above minimum wage. He once saw a server get a $100 tip for a table where he cooked a perfect steak, yet he got nothing. Meanwhile, that same server didn't even run their own food because the runners did it for them. So, I made a decision. If I was going to tip, I wanted it to go to everyone who made my meal happen, not just the person who handed me the plate. But guess what? Most restaurants don't let you do that. Tips go straight to the servers, and while some places have tip pooling, a lot don't share fairly. Then came the moment that made me say, enough. I was out with friends at a nice restaurant, and the service was just okay. Nothing terrible, but nothing amazing either. We got our food late, one of my dishes was wrong, and the server barely checked in. But when the bill came, one of my friends leaned over and whispered, "Make sure you tip at least 25%. They get paid nothing." I looked at the bill, saw the suggested tips that started at 20%, and I couldn't do it. I paid my bill, left 0 tip, and walked out. My friends were shocked. They called me cheap, selfish, even a bad person. They told me I should know better and that it's not the server's fault. But was it my fault? I don't control how restaurants pay their staff. I don't make the rules. I just refuse to keep throwing money at a system that's broken. If restaurants can't pay a living wage, that's not my responsibility. But now, I'm being treated like a villain. My friends act awkward around me, and one even told me she doesn't want to go out with me anymore because I embarrass her. Am I the bleep bleep for saying no to tipping? A few weeks after that night, I started noticing just how many people had strong opinions about tipping. It was everywhere: social media, news articles, even random conversations I overheard at work. Some people said that tipping was essential because workers needed it to survive. Others, like me, were fed up with how out of hand it had become. Then, I had another experience that solidified my stance even more. I was in a rush one morning and stopped at a local bakery for a muffin coffee. The cashier rang me up, and when I inserted my card, the dreaded screen popped up. Would you like to leave a tip? The options: 18%, 20%, or 25%. No tip option. I had to manually click custom amount and put in 0. The cashier immediately gave me a look. You know the one. That judgmental, passive-aggressive, oh, so you're that kind of person look. And then, the worst part, she sighed, like I had personally insulted her by not tipping for something she literally just grabbed off a shelf and handed to me. That was when I realized something. Tipping is no longer about rewarding good service. It's become an expectation, a demand, even when no actual service is provided beyond the bare minimum. A friend of mine, T, 30F, works as a barista and once told me that the moment someone doesn't tip, the whole staff notices. We remember faces, she said. If someone doesn't tip, we talk about them, we judge them. And that is the problem. Tipping should be optional. It should be based on the quality of service, not a forced social obligation. Yet, here I was, being shamed by strangers for not tipping on a muffin. So, I stopped completely. No tips at coffee shops, no tips at bakeries, no tips at places where workers are already getting an hourly wage that has nothing to do with my generosity. The only time I tip now is if someone goes above and beyond, like a server who genuinely makes my experience special. But I won't lie, this decision has made me a social outcast. My friends barely invite me out anymore. I get dirty looks when I refuse to tip. Even my family thinks I'm being heartless. So, I'll ask again, am I the bleep bleep for putting my foot down and refusing to participate in a tipping culture that has lost all meaning? Please subscribe and leave us a like and a comment if you loved our story today.